You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Tonight, I rise in support of House Bill 2 in the hopes that I, too, may be able to provide a voice for the voiceless and a fighting chance at life for the unborn. First, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge my esteemed colleagues on this floor for the respect and reverence they've shown to both the citizens and each other while discussing this highly charged and emotional issue. I'd also like to make a special acknowledgement to Chairwoman Jane Nelson, who did a masterful job of presiding over an orderly and respectful hearing on this issue earlier this week. A hearing which lasted over 13 hours, a hearing which elicited testimony from nearly 500 individuals, and a hearing in which all voices were given an opportunity to be heard. Members, we have vigorously debated this legislation over many weeks, and while I think we can all agree this process has been trying, I hope I'm not alone in the feeling that it's been enlightening as well. Over the past several months, we've heard from women and men from all over this state, some wearing orange and some wearing blue. Each has offered their thoughts and their concerns regarding this legislation. Many shared personal and heartbreaking stories of unimaginable tragedy. Your collective testimony has helped put a human face on this issue, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for having the courage to join us here at the state capitol. Wait in line for the many hours, share your story, and play a truly participatory role in your government. During this process, I have listened to hours of stories and struggled with the many deep and philosophical issues and concerns that this issue addresses. This issue strikes at the very core of our humanity and forces us to consider a fundamental question. What do we consider to be a human life? I realize that there are those who view this issue much differently than myself. Those who will look at a 5-month sonogram and see little more than a glob of undifferentiated cells, with no identity, with no personality, and with no soul. But there are also those of us who can look at the same image and see the beauty and majesty of God's most awe-inspiring creation, the creation of a new human being, one that feels pain, and one that deserves a chance to experience the fullness and wonder of life. And that difference in perspective, members, is what makes all the difference in the world. The issue of life is one that's deeply personal to me. While I'm sure most of you don't know this, many years ago, when my mother was pregnant with me, she contracted a disease called rubella, commonly known as German measles. While rubella is relatively benign in adults, it carries a significant potential to impart devastating consequences for the fetus developing in utero. At the time of her diagnosis, my mother was counseled to consider aborting the child she was carrying, with the implication that to do otherwise would condemn her child to a tragic life of pain and suffering. Thankfully for me, my mother and father walked out of that doctor's office and never turned back. And that's the only reason I'm able to stand here before you today. As a physician, as a husband, as a father, and as a member of the Texas State Senate. Over the course of my life, my perspective on this issue has deepened, and my commitment to life has become even more profound. Many of you are aware that my wife is a doctor as well, an obstetrician and gynecologist who delivers newborn babies daily. She frequently shares her stories of joy that a new family feels when they hold their precious young child for the first time, and the unimaginable heartbreak when one of her patients suffers a miscarriage or some other tragic complication from which there is no remedy. As time went on and our 3 boys entered our lives, our young family was made complete. I can still remember the intensity of the love of holding my oldest son, Carson, for the first time in my arms. I can still remember the pain I felt the first time I heard him cry. It changed me deeply and fundamentally in a way that's difficult to accurately describe. After you felt that feeling, it's like a bell that can't be unrung. And perhaps that's why it's difficult for me to view this issue in an alternative context. Senators, It's been stated by many people on this floor, Democrats and Republicans, that no one is in favor of abortion. And I believe that to be an accurate and sincere sentiment. Though we may be different in our approaches by which we would seek to make abortion less prevalent in our state, our nation, and our society, in the end, we all want the same thing. From my perspective, this bill is a critical step forward to that end, but it must not be the only step. As a legislature, we do owe it to our citizens to consider the entire problem, not only addressing the facilities that supply abortions, but also the factors that drive demand for abortions. You'll notice I didn't vote for any amendments this evening. I think it's too important to get this bill passed and get it to the governor's office. But I also think it would have been more appropriate that those amendments had been added to the bills as they went through the regular session and had been allowed to come to the floor by the Democrat leadership. However, I can say I've heard the proposals this evening from my Democrat colleagues, which I feel merit further consideration. And though they may not each be germane to the specific debate at hand, hope that we can revisit these measures as standalone bills in the future. And I would welcome the opportunity to work with any of my colleagues who would be willing to work in good faith to reduce abortions in the state of Texas. I am pro-life, unquestionably and unapologetically. But if we mean what we say, we should each be willing to do more than what this particular bill speaks to. We must be willing to do everything in our power to reduce the number of unintended pregnancies in this state, promote alternatives to abortions, such as adoption, such as foster care, and evidence-based sex education. Just like each of us, I prefer to see abortion made less common. I believe that we should be willing to consider any and all proposals which serve to achieve that end, no matter which side of the aisle they come from. Senator Hager, thank you for your leadership on this issue. I respect you greatly and appreciate your demeanor and respectful tone throughout the duration of this debate. I can tell you that I plan to support your legislation because I believe it's an important step in protecting the unborn and also protecting the health of women in the state of Texas. I look forward to working with you, with Senator Nelson, with Senator Vanderpute, Senator Garcia, with Senator Watson, and with Senator Davis on the full breadth of this issue in the next legislative session. Thank you, Mr. President.